today. My whole head's not in frame. Okay, so by the way, oh my gosh, look at this teddy bear and then look at this dog. They're the same animal. Okay, so this teddy bear was purchased for me by my father, which is very, like, I didn't ask for a teddy bear, he just got me a teddy bear. I feel like that there's a difference in that. We just came back from Lake Tahoe, which was so much fun, really beautiful towards the end there, and we did like paddle boarding, we drove around, we got to see stuff, and at the end it was really beautiful. We rode these like electric bikes, which was so much fun. But in the beginning of that adventure, it was very, very smoky because of the mosquito fire. I will try to insert some clips to show you like the difference between with smoke and without smoke, because it rained one of the days and everything kind of calmed down. Here you guys can see what it looks like with all of the smoke. I think this was the first full day that we were there. Also, that guy falls off his paddleboard, kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, compared to what it is when it rains, like this is after it rained, how much more you can see. And in the next clip, this is when we were just walking around. Like normally you can completely see across the lake. It was really scary. I mean, you could see like little bits of ash falling down, like tiny bits, and like the whole, like, you could visibly see the smoke. You could smell the fire, and the air quality was so bad. On the day, like on the last day when we were leaving, when there wasn't any smoke, it was like 58 or something. The day before, it had been like 450, 500, like that much of a jump in air quality. So it's quite nerve-wracking. But while I was there, I just didn't get a lot of chance to do reading, and honestly, I like haven't been doing a lot of reading in the last 2-ish weeks. So I thought I would do maybe a review of a book that I read a while ago that I have some thoughts on, and that is, oh man, where's my book? Oh, it's right here. Hello. This is, okay, I might have mentioned this in a past video. I like write a lot of my like reading tracking stuff in this notebook. And I have sort of personal ways that I choose to monitor my reading habits. And I think it'd be kind of cool to go over that at some point. Yes. Okay, where did I write this? Okay, Tender is the Flesh. That's the book I want to talk about. Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. So this book, Tender is the Flesh, is very intense in that it's really gory, it's really graphic, and in a lot of ways I would argue it's needlessly gory and graphic. It chooses to do sort of like what are the most horrible things that would happen in this scenario. And the scenario is, it's this, I forgot the word. Oh my God. Dystopia. It's this dystopian world where a virus has come through. It has made animals like bad. Like people can't eat animals now or else they'll get the virus. And they also like they're scared of animals now. And it's affected like from household animals to wild animals, birds, all of it. And so now, as a replacement for animal meat, people are eating human meat. And they've come up with a variety of ways of replacing animal meat, and the role that animals play in our world with humans. And they also have created this culture around like calling the humans heads rather than, you know, just saying it's a person. And there's these ways of dehumanizing and separating themselves, you know, the people who are eating the meat versus the kind of cattle humans. This is not going to be, I would not call this spoiler free, but it's not really going to get into a lot of specifics. It's just, I don't know, I don't think that this book has that wild of a plot. Like there's a very thin plot line that kind of follows through, but for most of it, I would say it is our main character, whose name I did not write down, but it is a main character walking through, and you're seeing different ways that society has changed to accommodate this crisis. So like you're seeing what is the butcher like, what is the, you know, the meat processing plant like, what is hunting like now, all of these kind of vague things, and what, you know, what's it like to be a, you know, housewife who's doing this, what's it like to be a evil scientist who's testing on living beings, all of those scenarios. And so there is a plot point where the main character has been gifted a very sort of prized head, and what he decides to do in that situation with the kind of female that he's been given. And here, okay, so when I was reading the back of this book, I did not expect it to, I expected the human like product to be more human, but they have very specifically like genetically modified the humans, so they're not like the book I think does a really good job of making the humans like as not human as possible, which I didn't think was going to be the point. I thought the point was going to be that these are two of very similar, these are two of the same species, and we have seen the kind of lucky ones be spared in a way that the unlucky ones were not spared. But you know, it's not that at all. And it was kind of surprising to me, because I really thought it was going to be like you're gonna be able to have a conversation with someone who's about to be like killed to be eaten, and that's not the case. Like, these people can talk. They've had a lot of that taken away from them, and I feel like that kind of loses an element of this that I think should have been maintained, which is like you can talk to someone and you're like, what would our animals that we're killing and eating, what would they have to say if they could engage in a conversation with us? And the book just doesn't do that. And I'll get into like what I think the allegory or whatever I think that is in a little bit. I want to get back to how like gory the story, it is every graphic thing you could imagine, like from, you know, sexual assault to just absolute grotesque violence to cannibalism. Like, it's like obviously cannibalism is in the book, but like real in-depth cannibalism is in this book. And I think that at some point, like what, like 12-year-old me would have been like, oh cool, it's so edgy. But you know, not 12-year-old me just sort of feels like there was so much time taken in a kind of short story to tell you about these really grotesque things, wherein to me, I get it. You know, I get that it's gross. I get that it's a very difficult thing to visualize. I just wish that the more moral aspects of it could have been explored. And those were the parts of the book that I did like. I do feel like our main character does a good job of questioning this, being curious. And so I thought that as a main character, he could have been exploring more than just look at this really violent, horrible thing happening in front of you. Another thing I liked, and I was watching, I think, Better Than Food, his take on this, and he was like, yeah, I don't really believe that this virus would come, like, he didn't really believe the kind of virus story, which one element of this that I absolutely loved was how as a reader, we are told to question the legitimacy of this virus. Like, is it actually real? You know, is it impossible for people to eat meat? And we see even like the government coming out and saying, oh, actually you can't be fully satisfied by a vegan diet. You have to eat some form of meat. So, oh my God, this is so loud. Okay, that was really loud. The government coming out and saying like, oh, you have to eat some sort of meat. You can't be fully satisfied on just a plant-based diet. Like, and these ideas coming through, and the main character and you as the reader sort of being told that these are conspiracies and that these are lies and you're being lied to. And you even see how language changes. Instead of being vegan, they're like veganoids. And I thought that was clever in that, first of all, I I do think that we end up having these conspiracy theories. I mean, we had that with coronavirus. But in this case, you know, you want to believe that the virus isn't real because the virus is resulting in a society where we eat humans. So I don't want to believe that it's a real virus within the context of the story. And you also see how science and these scientific communities, how they have sort of bent to accommodate a society around them. And I don't think that that's inaccurate for how science works. Like, I think we want to believe that our scientific communities are impervious to these kinds of horrible desires, but we know they're not. You know, we've seen how they can be manipulated, not only like through eugenics, but we also see how they can be manipulated through tobacco companies coming out with their science, or sugar companies, or, you know, having people who are studying stuff to deny climate change. You know, we can see actively how interests pollute science and how interests can be used to pollute science. So I liked those elements of the book. Yeah. So going in, I think the last point I sort of want to talk about is what I think the book is trying to say. I think it's really kind of, in a way, it's almost easy to come out and say it's about how we treat animals bad. But I think this book goes beyond that. Like, the book doesn't just say how we treat animals bad. It's like very explicitly and purposefully talking about people. There's things that happen in this book that just don't happen. We don't do that to animals. I'm thinking about this scene with like how people in debt pay off their debt. There's just certain elements of this that I feel like went beyond how we treat animals. So I question, was that the extent of, you know, the metaphor, it's a parable, what was that the extent of the allegory, right? Like, is that all we're supposed to take from this? Don't eat animals, it's unethical and it's inhumane to eat animals. And I think that that can be a part of this, but I also took it even further personally, and to say that this is sort of how we treat people. Like, we in the US often purchase things that were routinely made by slave labor that had a real human cost associated with them, and yet we don't see that in any way. And I think for me there was a big discussion of exploitation outside of just, you know, consuming something for a need, but like, you know, how we do use human lives. We almost throw them away to get this ease, to get cheapness, to get comfort. And we're willing to kind of say, well, this is the life I want to live. I want to live a life where where nothing has changed, where I don't have to change anything about who I am. I don't have to adjust myself. I can exploit humans, but it's over there and I'm ignoring it, and I'm not, you know, I'm calling it fast fashion. I'm calling it, you know, cheaply made things, without having to accept the fact that that's a person who is living. Yeah, maybe they're not being killed, but frequently people do die in like in like sweatshops and stuff like that. But, you know, I'm not having to sit there and like confront the human experience that's going into, you know, making my life comfortable. And in the book, it's a big thing that's talked about how people, instead of changing their ways, they just wanted to find a way to adapt society so that they can change as little as possible. And by doing that, they have become extremely cruel. And that is what we have done, right? Like, I mean, like, okay, yeah, we got rid of slavery, but we also kept it. Like, there's absolutely still slavery occurring in the world. And just because in the US it's kind of relegated in a way to prisons, you know, oh, we don't have slavery here, we don't have chattel slavery here, we're not dealing with that, but we are, you know. And so I think that, yeah, but then the animal thing does work too, right? Like, instead of just lightly changing the world, like instead of lightly changing your diet to not incorporate animal product, you're, you know, no, I don't want to change anything about my life, I have to eat meat. I mean, and I agree with the perspective that, like, you, like, I don't know. I disagree with the whole notion of like rationalizing why you're a meat eater. Like, it might, like, if you like meat, you're just eating meat, you know, it's fine. Like, it's not fine if people who view that as akin to murder, but like, I don't like when people kind of try to be like, oh, well, this is nature and this is how my ancestors were and blah, 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 blah. Or like, I wouldn't like vegan food. Like, no, just say you're doing something that's resulting in the death of another thing. Like, it's just say that, acknowledge that, and try to reduce that where you can. I don't know. This is getting into a lot of my personal opinions about veganism, but that's not important. I think the book, it spends too much time being crazy and less time making a point. And I think it could have made cooler points, if that makes sense. Like, I think it would have been just as cool if we saw not only humans as a form of meat, but also like how slave labor was being used, how being a criminal resulted in these, like, I don't know, I think there could have been like a much more interesting way of complicating the story that didn't happen. Yeah. And then in my last sort of point is, I feel like this story would have been better if it was short stories. If you had like the first story, which was like the main overarching premise, maybe introducing a main character, like the guy we had, and then have him have a couple of like stories in between, a couple of things happen to him. Because I do like the ending. I actually think the ending is really good, and I like that it's not a good ending, you know. I like it. But I went like these crazy moments of like, oh, the butcher, this is what she's like, just having that be like a one-off story, having all of these moments, and so you're able to have more discussion rather than just trying to like have, because it really felt like that. It felt like one guy who kind of has a small thing happening and all these other things thrown in for shock, versus if you made them into short stories, they would have felt, I think, a little bit more cohesive, not like this review. This review is all over the place. I haven't read this book in a long time, and I didn't really plan this out in any way. I just kind of wanted to talk about the book. And I thought the book was a little ham-handed, if that's the term, and I don't know, head-handed, if we're going to use the metaphor in the book or whatever. I just didn't think it did a lot. Like, it was trying to be edgy, and in the end I was just like, but why? Like, what else is there other than just being gross? And I feel like it's something that is good Halloween, fall, shock weather. I think it is something that like young people who want to read something that feels, which I'm not trying to be patronizing to young people. I'm just saying that like, I think that when you're younger, a book like this can be a little bit cooler to read, especially because if you're like just coming off of reading like children's books, right, where you don't get a lot of like gross visceral stuff, reading this, you know, as a teenager can be a little bit more novel to you, versus when you've read more of that, it just gets a little bit old, you know. And but yeah, I do think it's like, if you're gonna just like drop some money on it, you know, you might as well get a copy and then give it to everyone you know, and like, here, read this book, what do you think? Is it as gross as I think it is? I don't know. I don't think I don't know. It's like, I don't know if I'd recommend it. Like, would I recommend it? Depends on what you're into. If you're into just like shocking books, maybe, but if you want like a good read, I would argue, no, this is not worth it. So yeah, that's it. It was, like I said, it was fine. Currently, I don't even know what I'm currently reading. Who knows? It might be different. I haven't finished Tomb of Sand, even though it's really good. I just think I kind of fallen into a rut, and I need to get something a little snappy to bring my attention back. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.